This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry.
That's who we're looking for. There we go. Bang. Goes. And there you go. It's that easy.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
I heard about technologically stunted, and that is Tyler Dyck to a definition. I think Luddite comes into play there somewhere.
Jeremy seems to be not so bad. Jeremy seems
yeah.
He's good. He likes his Instagram and whatnot.
He lives in a bit of a virtual world, so.
I was just saying this is probably the earliest and the first BC Spirits podcast. Live stream, I mean. So it's the first BC Spirits live stream for sure. We've never done a live stream on BC Spirits before. But it's definitely the earliest live stream I've ever done. 9 a.m. is very early.
It is early. We should definitely have a few drinks in hand to be up at this time.
Definitely. How's things out there?
They're going pretty well. You know, I think it's a different reality right now with a lot of the distillers in the province having pivoted a bit to try to fill the void for hand sanitizer, which, you know, I think there's a dark place in distillers' hell for all of us when we finish with this for butchering so much whiskey and gin to make hand sanitizer. But I guess that's the times.
And how much are you as well? Let's start from the beginning before we get into that. I seem like I'm skipping way ahead. How about you introduce yourself to everybody who's watching and explain a little bit about who you are?
Okay, well, my name's Tyler Dyck, and our family has Okanagan Spirits craft distillery. So we're in going into our 17th year of production this year. So BC's first original craft distillery, I guess. We have 2 distillery locations, one in Kelowna and our main one in Vernon. And yeah, it's a family operation. You mentioned my brother, so he's the techno genius in the family, and then my twin sister, so she got all of the looks and most of the brains in the family, and there's me and my dad, who basically haul wrenches around and fix shit when it gets broken. So
what year did you start up?
2003, then going into 2004 was first release. So
wow.
The first release was I think January 2004. So
that's crazy. And you were one of the very first, like, there's like 5 distilleries that that sort of all were in that sort of cusp.
Yeah, so so we would have been the first past the post, I guess. But literally in those days, of course, it was kind of, you know, if you remember our old place, it was kind of like a garage, right? And so it was small. There was no such thing as craft distilling in BC at that time. There was no craft distillery license. So it was really a really good idea, but there was nothing in place to support it. So it was kind of financial suicide for the first 10 years or so. And then over the first few years, there got to be like another one and then another one and then another. And we kept on, it was like more frogs jumping into that pot. And then all of us realizing, wow, this was the dumbest thing that we ever did here. And
so what made you do it then?
I think early on, if you look at, Okanagan Spirits was really started off of, our first distiller was Frank Dieter. And then there's a group of investors that really helped, our family being one of them, that kind of got things going, I guess, in those early years. But I think it was the idea that it could be done and it should be done. You know, you look at all the places, you look at what happened in wine. Is probably the best place. And BC's cultural fabric was really changed with the wine industry. And there was that sort of field to bottle experience, that terroir specificity. And I think there was this idea that we saw it in the wine, then in the beer, and then all of a sudden there was really nothing in the spirits. And as you know, from working in spirits, since Prohibition, it went to a very commercial model. So not terroir specific at all for the most part. A lot of NGS and just spirits bought in the world market, and then retweaked a little bit, flavors added here and there, and kind of the same stuff in a lot of different bottles. And so the feeling was that, hey, this should be done, and what a great opportunity to get in and be first to try to give a terroir specific product to it. Now, of course, with the taxation laws in place and everything at the time, we'd produce a product. It was the property of the state essentially, and basically they would take 3/4 of the sticker price. So, and as you know, if you're working farm to flask, about 50% of, if you look at the sticker price on anybody in craft nowadays, 50% of it's going to be their cost to get it to the bottle, and that's why started the guild early on, and then the guild grew and kind of fizzled after a bit, and then re-got its life in sort of 2011 probably. Then 2013 the new craft agreement came into play, and that just transformed things. Now, not saying the craft agreement's perfect. It's got a lot of shitty points in it that we're still working on, but it really allowed for celebration of locality, if that makes sense, and actually bringing true ferment through distillation, rather than just, hey, I'm going to buy in pre-made NGS and it shows up, it's 95% of the work's done. And so really it put that sort of craftsmanship, I think, back into it, which is great. You know, if that's, you know, when I go to a wine region, I want to taste what that Pinot Noir from there tastes like. You know, if I just want, you know, wine for say, I might buy you know, bottled in Canada, which was probably made in Chile wine. That's kind of what the spirits industry had been devolving, I think, into. And then now I think you see this renaissance in the last 20 years where all around the world, people they're expecting more, right? All of us, we're first world snobs. We want to, you know, I want to go to the Willamette Valley and have a Willamette Pinot or Marichal Foch. Even if I may not like it, it's an experience. And so I think that people are voting to have those sort of food and cultural and sort of wine, beer, and spirits experiences these days.
So which was the first location? Was Vernon the first location?
Vernon was, yeah. So Vernon, the first location, you were right beside Okanagan Spring Brewery, which was another Vernon sort of Okanagan family business that started off, and then of course they went huge, right? Sapporo's, it's Sapporo now. So
yeah.
So we were right beside them, and actually they were great in the early days, of course, because that was still, you go across the street and be like, holy cow, we're having problems with this, can you guys help out with something? And they would, you know, have all their mill rights and everything that could come across. So, you know, it was great. We first started there, then we, after about 2010 or so, I think we built the Kelowna location. And then after 2013, you know, Peter, our head distiller, you know, had done so well at the World Spirits Awards that we couldn't keep anything on the shelf. So we started rebuilding Vernon in a different location. And that was about a 2-year build. It was quite a big rebuild. And then we built
a huge facility.
Yeah, I guess for, you know, tiny still in the World Spirits thing.
Yeah.
You think about it that way. You know, it's a facility that can produce probably about a couple 100,000 bottles a year. Of course, because we're hemmed in by the regulations, we have to stay below that sort of 100,000 liter cap. So we're making a lot of whiskey and putting it into our new rick house, which is now full, and so we're building another one coming up.
Seriously?
Yeah. So it's
how many barrels do you got going?
I've got about 600 in there. We've got capacity for a few hundred more, but as you know, it takes a while to build things out. So we're kind of aiming for the future. Our goal is to really, we should be making all craft distilleries. If you look in the States, a new craft distillery being made in the States nowadays, whiskey centric, would be kind of aiming theirself at that. Probably around per year, they'd probably be looking at 800 to 1,200 barrels a year. Whereas, you know, at our current production level now, we're probably doing 200 barrels a year, but we should be aiming a little bit higher. You know, unfortunately, the BC government has this ridiculous clause in place through the LDB that they think that it helps BC in some way to limit the amount of BC, 100% BC product we can make. And really all it does is hurt the farmers. You know, our farmers are always telling us daily, hey, we want to plant more for you. And of course, we deal directly with the farmers. So I get to go and talk to the farm families and say, yeah, we'd love to help you out a little bit more, but we're at max, and that's just idiotic.
The rules right now, what's the cap for distilleries right now?
The cap is, well, effectively, there's kind of two ceilings. There's up to 50,000 liters. You can you're direct distributing, and you don't pay a markup. But if you go through the LDB, they take their full cut, their pound of flesh, and actually, it's like taking all the flesh off your skeleton and then kicking in the ass, and your skeleton goes out the door. Whereas if you sell above 50,000, then you start going into these tiers of markup, and you're allowed to. They basically now say if you go above 100,000, they're going to say that you're no longer BC, even if you are 100% BC. So now they successful BC, now they'll determine that you're not BC, that you're commercial in nature, which is idiotic, right? That's like taking and saying, hey, you made it to the top spot, and now we're going to strip you of any title, and we're going to throw you out the side door type thing. But the problem, I say there's two ceilings, because they see it as, oh, we're going to give you up to 100,000. But then their interpretation of how once you cross 50,000, they say, okay, now you're a 50 to 60,000 liter distillery, and we're going to, on every bottle the next year, we're going to tax you as if you're 60,000. So we're going to charge you that, whatever the markup is. So effectively, that next bottle, so your 50,000th liter, your next liter costs you $210,000 in tax straight to the government right away.
Wow.
So why would you ever go above it? It's moronic in nature. It's basically against any tax policy. And for some reason, the Attorney General and the head of the LDB are just standing firm on something. I think it's just they haven't put any thought process into it, and they've looked at it and said, oh, no, it's good. It's good. It's good. Just let it go. But unfortunately, that's meant that the players that are there that have grown and could grow more are stunted, because of course we wouldn't dare go above that level, because $210,000 for the next bottle of Laird, come on, that's ridiculous. So unfortunately, it's meant that no one can invest in their success. We've been at a stall point for almost 7 years now with this government. This government and the last one saying, hey, we could be better. We could do better. We could promote more BC farms. We could have, better products going forward and hire more people. And they often say, well, no, this is good enough for you guys, which they, I'll point out, they would never say to the wine industry.
Yeah.
If you went to Quailsgate Winery and said, hey, it was, we're going to make you play like the spirits guys. You're only allowed to make 60,000 bottles. Now, of course, they released 1.3 million liters last year, and they're a moderate size winery. Yeah, but that's not even a large winery, right? No. It's a good success story. Like if you look at Quailsgate, they're a gem of the Okanagan. Why wouldn't we celebrate that? And they do. But then, of course, they flip around and say, yeah, but for you guys in spirits, 50,000, that's enough. That's one size of the tank.
Do you think it's a little prohibition still, like prohibition sort of sitting there, like wine and beer is fine, but let's talk about liquor. Like I find it with BC Spirits, like talking to tourism bodies about spirit tourism, distillery tourism, is still something that's they're sort of like arm's length out, because wine tourism and beer tourism, they're all behind because there's more obviously, but as soon as you start talking about distillery tourism, they're like, we don't want to be pushing anyone drinking hard alcohol or hard liquor.
Which is ridiculous. There is some of this sort of draconian thinking that's out there, and prohibition, temperance movement type thinking. I've been in meetings in past government people and had them say, like, straight to the face, well, when I say, why are you treating us different than wine? And I've had the comment come back, well, wine is classy. And it's been like, come on, premium spirits. We're not selling off the Everclear here, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there still is some temperance movement thought that hard spirits are bad for you. But really, if you look at the science of it, like when we get down, we're supposed to be a science-based, nation here. And the governments all profess to be that, and yet they tax us differently. Apparently, the alcohol molecule for an excise tax level, my alcohol molecule in this bottle, if you go with the same proportion in a bottle of wine, there's no excise on that. You put it in beer, and the equivalent size bottle, they're paying about 1/25th the excisable.
Wow.
And so, you know, really, are you discriminating against? Is it anything other than discrimination? And that's really what it comes down to, is just backwards thinking. They just can't get out of that side. And they'll often say, well, you know what? Oh yeah, this is much more harmful, but you're drinking way less of it. You know, you might have 4 ounces, whereas you might go and have 4 to 6 beer. You know, is there anything different between the two? And the end level, you've had the same amount of alcohol molecules.
Mm-hmm.
They should be deemed the same.
The social thing, it has always bugged me with the BC liquor stores and the liquor board, has been, I can't get like Punta Mess on the shelf or some crazy vermouth. I have to spec order that. But then there's 15 different styles of cooking sherry in 4-liter bottles on the bottom shelf of every liquor store. I'm like, well, what's that market for? What do you need? What do you even need 4 liters of cooking sherry for anything? We know what sort of people are going to come in and buy that. The substance misusers and stuff like that. But I, as a bartender, as an operations guy, I can't get something crazy on the shelf that I'm going to pay $50-$60 for. I've always found the social model has been always very, very weird. Like listing a whole bunch of Mickeys of vodka that are made in a macro distillery somewhere, but you can't get a craft bottle of vodka on the shelf.
Yeah, you know, there's a very good reason. There's one truth to exactly why that happens. The LDB, which controls liquor in the province, is run off a model of just making maximum money. And how do you do that? Well, you sell the cheapest products in the highest volume, because premium products are going to be bought at a certain lower rate. And so you've got the LDB, which is focusing almost entirely on getting high volume, very low cost items that they can go through. And you've seen that model change in the last few years. You get single serve beer, high alcohol level. Mm-hmm. You get shots of Everclear at the till, last minute buy. Now, you and I aren't going in and getting my Wildcat and then a shot that I can pour into. That's just catering to the people that really have an issue with alcohol, and it shouldn't be made easier and cheaper so you can funnel that habit. And really that's what's happening, is there's a model of just getting that cheap stuff out there at the expense of premium and locality. And so that's where, you know, we've often called, whether it's wine, beer, or spirits, the head of each of those guilds, we often call on the Attorney General and the LDB to celebrate that sort of premium level and that sort of mid-premium level, which is really what locality of production is. You can get your price point down because it powers jobs. It powers the local economy, and it creates a sort of elegant culture of support of locality. But it also is not catering to a volume-driven industry that is only there to create more alcoholics, really, and not really those that are savoring alcohol for the experience of it. And really, you know, if you look at whether it's Okanagan Spirits or whether it's Pemberton or wherever, we're not in it to sell as much volume as possible. We don't want people to get wasted on our stuff. We want them to enjoy it and remember it so that they can talk to their buddies, and then their buddies have a great experience with it. So really the system's broke, and because the head of the system is the Attorney General, who is far too busy to deal with anything else other than they're dealing with ICBC, issues, all of this, housing. And so all they have time to listen to is the head of the LDB, who's saying, no, everything's fine. We're making a ton of money selling low grade stuff. Of course, they won't say it that way. And so the Attorney General will say, well, it's not broke, so let's not fix it. But it is broke. It's fundamentally broke.
So as the lobbyist for the Craft Distillers Guild, I know you, we're good friends. So I know how much work you do with the government trying to lobby these changes. And I've been saying, I think I've mentioned it to you, I've been saying for the last 6 to 12 months, before you go into the government as yourself, because you've been, as you said, you've been sort of hitting that 50,000 litre cap for the last 7 years. You've been a singular voice and a singular person who's sort of saying, hey, we're hitting the cap, we need to move it up. But in the last 12 months, I know that you've seen Sheringham hit their cap last year, and a few other distilleries that have been around. Yeah. So who else hit that cap last year?
Well, Shelter Point's getting close there. And a lot of them too, you look at Shelter Point's a good example. They're kind of like us in a way that they don't run their facility at full capacity, but they should and they could. You know, they could easily turn out 4 times the volume, as could we. But so you've got all this equipment and all this cost and this potential. And yet we're selling out of all of our lines, but we're keeping below the cap. You know, we've pulled back from every other province selling in. It takes 15 years to develop all those relationships. And in the last 2-3 years, we've pulled back out of every single one. This is Okanagan Spirits alone. We ship nothing internationally. We've had orders like tens of thousands of bottles requested for France, for Singapore, for Quebec wanted 100,000 bottles of a gin that we did for Martin Picard, a celebrity chef there.
Yeah.
Order placed, well, it put us above our cap and they would strip us of our license and say we're no longer Craft BC. How moronic is that? Like, this is the government intentionally sandbagging the craft industry just because they don't want to make a change that could celebrate the whole industry. Now, what I'm really hoping comes out of this whole COVID crisis, I think people are realizing that their self-sufficiency is going to be a thing and celebrating locality is going to be a thing moving forward, especially on a national but also provincial level. And so we're really hoping that sense will prevail in putting more emphasis on the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Jobs. When it comes to alcohol production in BC, that's not an LDB issue. LDB is selling cheap alcohol. That's fine. And they're high volumes. And they do have some great high-end stuff too, but they make their money on the low-end stuff. And so if you look at the overall situation, the Attorney General who sits atop the whole industry should be listening to agriculture and jobs. That's what's going to power BC's economy. It's going to power our culture into the next couple of decades. You know, we could have, when we should have, we're at the forefront of the craft movement in Canada. And you could even say in North America to a big extent, if you look at what could have happened. But do you really want to have the government drag its heels? So just like in the craft brewing market, that people now say Portland's the head of craft and the West Coast of the States, when really it started in BC. You know, we just don't want, we're seeing that we're missing the boat again on this. You know, we've got 50 distilleries in the province that really should be celebrated for what they are. They all do a great job, but you imagine if some of the restrictions were off and some of the moronic rules that are there that, you know, are imposed on us and not any other sector of alcohol within BC. And
well, I think they have to look at, excuse me, I think they have to look at, sanitizer production at just purely how much sanitizer has been getting produced. Like, if you look at some of the distilleries, how much sanitizer they produced in the last month, like yours, literally you're already going over your 50,000 litre cap. Like, the amount of sanitizer that's going out the doors is tens of thousands of litres in 4 weeks, which means that if these caps were lifted, distilleries could literally make that sort of volume into actual sellable alcohol in a space of 6 weeks. So I think I'm hoping it changes. I really hope. I've talked to Able BC and a few other associations like yourselves that they're lobbying the government. Do you feel like the government's loosening up a little bit when you have a chat to them?
You know, we have now the BTAP Liquor Advisory Panel, which is the wine, spirits, Able BC, you know, so heads of each of those guys. So we get to sit at the table with them. You know, I think that the spirits industry is still kicked down the table when it comes to, you know, how much weight is put upon that. But at least there's an avenue for talking about it. And I really, you know, I'm hopeful. I'm more hopeful than I've been in the past, but it is not coming quickly. And of course, this crisis kind of sidelines all these sort of aspects. But you know, I think that when people look at it, if you take the time, because the issues around craft could be literally sorted out in 1 4-hour meeting. There's like 4 key points really, and they've all already been granted to the other sectors. So they already have a pathway to do it. They've got a proven thing. And you know, really, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And so, you know, otherwise it's just pure discrimination. So when you look at that sort of system, it's like you've done it, you've proved it, and you've made tons more money off of it.
Yeah.
And it's created a cultural win for the province. So anybody, if they took the time to look at it, instead of government just saying no, 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 and trying to, you know, justify why they're saying no, if they sit down in a meeting and look at it, there's no level-headed person that's not going to look at it and say, yeah, that just makes sense on there. It's just getting them at the table for more than a 30-minute, here's a 30,000 feet view of the situation. So I'm hopeful. If you look at, you've got like the Ministry of Agriculture, you got Lana Popham and Wes Shoemaker, and Wes is a fantastic guy. He's been helping, he's been a real champion of this. And so I know there's people like him that really understand it. We've got like locally here, Steve Thompson, who's a Liberal, and Ben Stewart's working on this. We've got a lot of people that really know this portfolio well and know that it's wrong the way it's set up, in that the LDB controls everything, and not that there's not the level of respect given to the Ministry of Agriculture and Jobs. And now we've got a new minister, Minister Mungal, and I'm really hoping she's going to take a lead on this. We had Ralston before, he was awesome, and I think he'll still be a champion on, you just looking at it and saying, you could have 10,000 more jobs in the province. Good paying, why wouldn't you? Instead of, you have, if you promote a system that really champions buying in NGS and buying in whiskey from elsewhere, well, Dad and I could run the distillery. Okanagan Spirits, for our volume, we could run it ourselves, 2 people. Instead, we've got like almost 30, and we've got, over 3 dozen farm families now working for us. Where's the bigger benefit to the province?
So let's get off the politics and chat about Okanagan Spirits. You guys just sort of killed it at the World Spirit Awards. I can see all the printouts behind your shoulders.
Yeah. It was a good year. It was, I felt bad for our distillers. They get named Distillery of the Year, which is like the honor of the night there. Nice, usually a big red carpet event in Austria. And they come away with like 9 gold medals and, I can't even remember now, but 4 something silver and a bronze or whatever it was. And they were the darling of the ball that never happened. Of course, it got called off. We had our tickets bought. We're ready to get on a plane, and it gets called off the week before. Goes to a virtual format, and so we get to sit around and try to geek out and watch it online. But it's like watching the Academy Awards with no audience, right?
Yeah.
So, and then of course, at the same day that it gets announced. We're converted already over to making sanitizer for 4 days. And so we're essentially butchering what could be world-class spirits down the line to make sanitizer. So, but it was awesome. I have to say, I think we're going to, after this, we're going to have to maybe hit a redo and do a mock thing here at the distillery, and just a big red carpet event to celebrate. Cause that's against some of the world's best distillers, 350 distilleries from around the world that are there, and they've been, some of them, like 250 years doing this. So it's just an honor to be there with them. It was quite an awesome thing to find out.
So post-COVID, what is what's the plan for Okanagan Spirits for the rest of the year after all this is over?
Yeah, well, we're going to be having to make up some time on the whiskey front for sure. Getting our volume into barrel up. I think we've talked not on Instagram, but amongst each other, and Okanagan Spirits is now about 65% whiskey in our 4 different, there's different presentations of that, but 4 kind of main whiskey lines. So we'll have to be making up time on that. But we've got, a few new releases coming out. We've got a new expression of our BRBN bourbon, and then we've got our BLK BRBN, so our black bourbon, our cast strength bourbon's getting released. It's going to get bottled when we get away from, in the next couple of weeks. We've got to get it in bottle because it's coming out in about 3 weeks or so.
Nice. Well, thank you everything for your lobbying for the Craft Distillers Guild. I know how hard and how much work that takes. I think everybody appreciates it. Obviously, how much sanitizer everybody has clicked over to automatically make, no questions asked, has been insane. And I think in the beginning, I talked to Rick Pipes about this last week. I think in the beginning, everybody assumed they were going to be able to use their heads and tails. And then it's like, no, you've actually got to make it from scratch. And so I know a lot of people have pulled together. So breweries are donating like beer out of kegs, and sugar mills are donating sugar, and it's been kind of insane. But I want to thank you for your time, buddy.
Thank you very much. Yeah. No, it's great. And I think everyone's pulling hard. If you look at all of the distilleries and the breweries now, like we've got Okanagan Springs is delivering some beer for us to destroy, which is a lot cheaper way of making alcohol. So there is some really good heartwarming stories coming out of this COVID crisis and some collaboration there. So for sure. But thank you for having me on.
Perfect. I'll chat to you real soon. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. I know that your schedule's tight.
Oh, I'm going to be over there tasting some whiskey out of the barrel here pretty soon. So
it's
not going to be too rough.
Okay. Chat to you soon, man.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.